Alright guys, we're back and we're working on a couple things, but today is going to be more of a PSA than an actual lecture. Some things have been changed recently and, well, I let the ball drop on Monday and I did not get that lecture posted in time. So if you haven't seen the announcement or you don't know what's going on with that, go ahead and check Canvas, because that was my bad. I made a mistake on that mark. So it was also, I feel like we can do a little bit better on that lecture. There's a better way to approach that topic. So we're going to be talking a little bit more about that on Friday. So if you missed Monday's lecture, you do need to watch it. Because one of Friday's questions on the lecture quiz may come from that. It may not. You never know. But it's in your best interest to stay well informed. And it's also just a good way to keep apprised of everything for what we're going to be talking about. But anyway, that's Friday. Today is Wednesday. Alright, so what are we going to be doing today? We're going to be talking about a couple things. One of them is I've decided to unilaterally make a change to the annotated bib assignment. Whereas you guys had, so there was 12 sources that you needed to have the summary and a connection for each. This thing is also due Friday by midnight. So that due date still applies. It still needs to be turned up on Canvas. The other thing is you had the alternative to have 12 sources with a summary and or a connection, or you could have just six sources. Which again, summary and connection, plus a persuasive essay of however long you think is necessary to convince me that you only need 6 sources for this assignment. Alright, so let's just go over a couple things, what I'm expecting for you guys to have for summary and for the connection. So let's go ahead and just pause that a bit over here before we get on to the important information for today. Alright, so for a summary, the thing that you need is, like we were going over a bit on when you're talking about sources and other things a couple lessons ago. I lost all sense of time and space, having been trapped in my house forever. But it was in the past. We can safely assume that. The summary, when we were talking about it, whenever that was the summary, is whenever you're looking at an article or a source or whatever is one of these things over here, the summary needs to include all the important info. Now, how do you know if something is an important piece of information? Well, if you took it out, if you subtracted a fact or something else, we're just going to put etc. here, and it was not the same, then your summary is incomplete. And it's just, I want to say it's just that simple. Figuring that out is kind of difficult. Now, one of the things that we looked at for how to go about looking at this is when we were talking about power reading, so let's just tie this back into power reading, where you want to look first at, the abstract, because academic articles are ripped, I don't know. You have your abstract, and then you go intro, conclusion, then the body, and then everything. So just briefly touching back on power reading here, but if you look at this, what you get out of like the first 2-3 steps of power reading is usually what the important points are going to be for summarizing. And that's what you want to try to sum up in your summary for these over here. I'm not looking for you to write a paper. It shouldn't be more than maybe half a page for each of these, if that much. You want to try to make it as succinct as you can, getting all of this information in as short a space as possible. The other one for the connection is running out of room here. So we're just going to make a dotted line boundary. Yeah, little bit more. Alright, for the connection, that's going to be why is this important? Yes, I'm reading that sentence, Sumi. Why is this source that you're summarizing, why is that important? If your audience was trying to learn more about whatever topic you were looking at, why is it important that they know this specific part? So this is where you're going to connect those dots. And touching back when we were looking at, all the different citation styles, we were looking at MLA, APA, Chicago, I'm just going to CH just for space, is whenever you're introducing a source, and we were talking about, you include the author's name, you don't include the author's name, the whatever. This is kind of what we're talking about. So whenever you're going to be using that, this is what you want to be thinking about. So all those sources, all those things that you're going to be getting over here, and they're going to be colliding with your citation styles in your connection. You could almost copy and paste some of these things into that. I say almost. I don't want to see any copy and pasting necessarily, but you could almost copy and paste. You could paraphrase yourself, your connection here, and put it in your paper. I guess you could copy and paste it if it was grammatically correct. That's highly unlikely that it would be, but I'm not going to say it's entirely impossible. So you know what? You could copy and paste your connection into a final paper if and when we write a research paper for Unit 4. But that's more or less beside the point. So why is it important? So that's what you're trying to make evident in this connection. What does your source have to do with your topic? How are these two related through this? And why should your audience care? So going back over, one of the reasons I wanted to go back over all of this stuff is because we've talked about some other ways and some ways to think about approaching sources and sourcing information since I introduced this assignment to you guys at the very beginning of Unit 3, and I wanted to take a moment to draw some connections. That everything we've been talking about it's all one and the same thing. It's all working together, or ideally it should be. So, talking about this, and we were looking back at why something is important, looking at all these different sources, about how to include information, about why it should be relevant, why you're going to be, thinking about it to begin with. Why are you including it in this paper? Why is it important? Why should your audience care? And a way to make them care is to do the heavy lifting. We talked about that a couple classes ago, where if you know all the important points, this summary here, that sometimes is a useful way to introduce a source as well. It's actually often a really critical thing. So actually, let's just go ahead and start the page. We'll talk about that for a moment, because I feel it's worth emphasizing on this, because I'll let you guys in the secret. I'm not that big of a fan of research myself, especially if it's something that's just handed to you and expected to see, hey, just be interested in this. And I realize that it's kind of what I'm asking you guys to do, but I get it. I've been there. So one of the things at the end of this lecture, I'll mention something that's hopefully going to lighten the load for this Friday's assignment. But going back, what was I saying? Oh, that's right. We were talking about dealing with sources and introducing sources in the summary. That's what it was. So say you've gone around, say you've got your paper here. You have your name and all these other things, and you have, should be indented. You have your paper here, and it's all these different things, and it's all very well and good, and then you have your not your abstract, but you have your works cited. You have hanging indents, as we're using MLA in this example. Actually, you do that for every single style as well, so it's somewhat irrelevant. You have all of these, so this is your works cited, this is your actual paper, untitled, because I'm not that creative on the fly. And you're going to reference something from here to over here. Now, what you would normally want, what you guys may have done in high school or times before this, is usually you're like, oh, you have your source, you have a quote, you have something that if one of these people said you want to use it in here, or you're required to use it. Let's just be more honest. You've been required to use it. And, let's just, it's in Smith, and it's page 69 or whatever. And that goes at the end, period on the outside, and that's all you have to do. This does not cut it in college. That's not how you use sources. Because when you're talking and engaging with a source, in college you're expected to be knowledgeable and understanding about it. You're expected to use those things that we mentioned on the other page. I flip back to it, but it's really hard to flip back and forth in this notebook. So you just have to, I trust your memory that you can recall what we were talking about a second ago. But just sticking a quote in there it's not going to work. I feel like a lot of you guys probably know that anyway, but here is the thing that you will have to do. So whenever you're talking about a source, good grief, I think we'll have to start another page. Wasted a lot of space there, but that's okay. I have another one of these. Alright, I hope I'm still in camera in the frame. Should be, alright. We'll just assume that I am. If not, you guys can tell me if something is if it's cut off during half the page, then we'll take it from there. But what you want to be doing is if you're going to include a source, you have to introduce the source. Whenever you're including a source, it only becomes a miniature sort of paper. And then, even if you're not doing, 5-paragraph, it looks more like a sentence sign. Is it something like a paragraph? I don't know. That's beside the point. Even if you're doing a 5-paragraph essay format, which have your intro, body conclusion, blah, 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 and all that stuff, it's very boring. But it's what you're being asked to do a lot of the time. And it's very easy to grade, and there's a reason why it's been around for so long. But 5-paragraph essay style, even within that, well, within that and with everything else, whenever you're using a source, what you want to do is you're going to give a brief intro to the source. And that's where your summary is going to be able to come in. Now, you don't want to, and you shouldn't give a full-blown summary if you're bringing a source in. So you shouldn't talk about, so, for instance, if this was the actual length of your source, and say there was a quote that you were looking at, and we'll just put Smith again. If that's the actual inclusion of the source that you're talking about, then you don't want to give this whole heady paragraph up here that outweighs it. Usually your introduction should be, I want to say, no longer than the actual quoted material itself. That's not a canon rule. You don't have to do that. You're not wrong if your introduction is longer than the quoted material, or the paraphrase material doesn't have to be a quotation. But by and large, your introduction should be as short as you can make it while being as informative as it can be. But what you want to do is it does have to introduce the source, which is usually you want to introduce the author, so that's a big thing. We talk about the author, what their credentials are, why the audience should care about said author, and then how that author has anything to say regarding your topic. Say it's just, I don't know, gusty winds in New Mexico. So, and in winds, he's a certified meteorologist and he knows lots of things. And he has this one quote you want to talk about. You have to set the stage for this quote. Why is this important? That's what all that summary work is going to be doing. It's not just because I want you guys to do a lot of vigorous writing and I just want you to document all this. That's going to be useful for when you're introducing the source, because you can't just stick a citation at the end of a sentence and expect that to work. You have to provide context for why that source or that quotation, paraphrase, or whatever that information that you got outside of your paper, why that is important and why we should care. And then afterwards, you can link it to, so you would have your link, your connection to the rest of the paper after that. So you have 3 parts to it. You have your introduction of your source, which is what that summary on your annotated bibliography is going to be able to help with. And you have whatever that information from the source is, whether it's paraphrasing, whether it's a graph or statistic, whether it's a direct quotation as it is here, whatever that happens to be. That goes after it. And then you need to explain why that's important in the context of your paper. Why you, not the author. So your connection is not about the author. It's about what you think. Why is this relevant to what you are trying to say in this paper? Not necessarily an argument, but if you're taking a stance, it's even more important that you do that. But regardless, even if it's just informative or reflective and you're incorporating the words of somebody else, you need to talk about this. All right. So I think that was everything that we needed to go over. And that's one of the reasons that going over, all that stuff for the working bibliography, or that annotated bibliography, that's why it's relevant. It's because that's getting more information that you will then use when you actually put it into the paper. It's not just grunt work that I want you guys to do that. There's a very well reason, because that's what you're going to be using whenever you talk about a source. You can't just stick a citation at the end of a sentence and expect it to do the same amount of lifting. It doesn't work. It doesn't communicate the same amount of information. All right. So, that being said, some brief announcements to end out our video. So this is one of the things I just wanted to go over, because we've talked a lot about a lot of things. A lot of things have happened and changed over the course the beginning of this unit, we went from 2 weeks of spring break to then being kind of more or less on spring break, just at home and being required to do some schoolwork. But what you guys are going to be doing is, instead of, the 12 or 6 sources plus the persuasive paper that we've been talking about, I've opted unilaterally to reconsider that, and I want you guys to cut down on those. So I want you to do a max, it's going to be, you're going to do 8 fully fledged annotated bibliography sources, or 4 plus a paper. So reducing each of those by about 1/3. Now you still need to do the same thing. I'm expecting the same amount of work, that for each one of these, you need to do the summary and the connection for each one of them. But realizing, as evidence of the fact that I botched Monday's lecture, I know what it's like. There's a lot on our plates. It's hard to get at the motivation to do things. I understand it. And we still have to get some stuff done. We still have to do things. But to cut us a little bit of a break here for it. Not quite as many. 12's a bit much. 4 and 8 sound just right. The other thing is, well, actually, we'll have to talk about that on Monday because we're running out of time here. Want to keep this short. But if you guys have any questions about this, I hope this was helpful. Again, bridging some of the topics that we've talked about over the last several classes, and especially this. So remember, you don't have to do 12 or 6 plus a paper. You only have to do 8 or 4 plus a paper. And I'll include that in the announcement. Hopefully, Lord willing, I remember when this lecture goes live on Wednesday morning. But that's it for now. I will see you guys on Friday.